Ag PhD full episodes and more are now available on Acres TV, the newest ag platform connecting you to fields of information. Look for us on watchacrestv.com.
During our Farm Basics time each week, we like to address questions that we get from non-farmers about some of the practices we do on the farm. One has been, what do you do with that residue and why do some people bale it up, some people graze it, some people just leave the residue there? What's the difference and what should a farmer be doing?
Well, what should a farmer be doing? A farmer can do whatever a farmer wants to do that's going to work best for his rotation. Now, ideally, you'd say, okay, talk to me about these corn stalks. What's their importance? They hold nutrients. We would love for them to eventually break down and release all those nutrients back into the soil so a future crop can take advantage of that. Now, there's a number of different ways for that residue to break down. Let's take the no-till, no removal of crop residue from the field issue first. All right, if you're not doing any tillage and you're not pulling any residue out of the field, you've got a lot of residue after a corn crop. How can you get that residue to break down in the field? Well, those farmers are going to focus on soil health. What can we do with soil microbes? What can we do with fertility applications over the top, like nitrogen, for example, to help break down those corn stalks because they're full of carbon. They're really high carbon, low nitrogen. So if you add some nitrogen to the equation and the right bugs, you can break those stalks down, and over a period of a year or a couple years, you can break them down and release those nutrients back to the crop. That's the slow way. Now, there's other things you can do with residue to help it break down a little faster.
Yeah, and one of the things, if you have livestock, is you turn the cattle out. And you say, well, how are the cattle going to break this residue down? Well, two ways. Number one, they're going to eat any corn that is on the ground. That's usually a pretty good thing. It's in effect free food, because otherwise that corn would become volunteer corn and a weed in next year's soybean crop if you're raising soybeans.
Or would just rot in the field and
that's
go to
possible
waste.
too. Yep. So the other thing is, when you have cattle out there, they're constantly tromping around and they're dragging dirt over the top of that residue. It only takes a little bit of dirt because you get all those enzymes that are going, and you start breaking that residue down a lot faster. So not only when they hit the residue are they cutting some up a little bit with their feet, but they are also dragging dirt around, and that does speed that residue breakdown quite a bit.
Now, let's talk about if you take the stalks away. So whether that's chopping silage, where you cut the whole plant above the ground, the ear and the stalk, leaves, everything, and haul it away to be fed to livestock, or if you just take the grain out of the field and then later come back and bale up those stalks, which will eventually go to livestock, and it'll be part of the roughage in their diet most likely. Either way, if you're running through an animal, you're going to have manure come out the other end of the animal. Well, that manure often ends up back in the same field. So kind of like Brian was saying, well, you can graze it out in the field and have the cattle in the field eating the residue up, or you can bring the residue to the cattle and then bring the manure back to the field. There's a lot of different ways you can do it.
Well, that's if the manure goes back to the field. So that's always our concern, is when all the residue leaves the field, there are some nutrients, not a ridiculous amount, but there are some nutrients that leave with that. So either the farmer has to put more fertilizer on or put that manure back to replace those nutrients.
Well, like with anything in farming, there are many different ways to manage it, and there isn't just one right way to do it. We're talking about managing corn stalks out in fields today in our Farm Basics. But coming up a little bit later, we'll talk about how farmers might manage a weed and get it under control on their farm during our Weed of the Week segment. Stay tuned.